With Donald Trump coming hot off of his win in Iowa, conversations are emerging about what will happen at the resolution of this GOP primary. Will it be Donald Trump? Will it be Nikki Haley? Maybe Ron DeSantis, but I think everyone is making their bet it's going to be Donald Trump because that was the bet from the get-go. However, there is a conversation about what will happen with the Democratic process and their primaries, and everyone kind of thinks it's going to be Joe Biden. Now, of course, there's been speculation that it could be Joe Biden drops out in March. We will see. But some have warned that in order to prevent a loss, Joe Biden will start World War III. There's a couple of reasons. Wartime presidents win. They'll get a massive boost in their approval rating, the attention they generate from the public. But I got to be honest, Sleepy Joe is not going to inspire confidence. So I have to wonder that if a war really does break out on the scale of World War III, people might vote out Joe Biden in 2 seconds. But the other reason is that it could give the federal government, the Biden administration, the DOJ, sweeping executive authorities that people would just comply with. This would allow them to effectively lock down the election under some national security argument. Thus, there could be another shadow campaign to save the election. Well, right now we have major war news. Iranian airstrikes rock U.S. consulate in Iraqi city of Erbil, as terrifying footage shows 4 ballistic missiles exploding on nearby compound, it claims, is Israeli spy HQ. 4 civilians are killed. So they did not hit the U.S. consulate, is my understanding, but they almost did. This is the escalation of the war with Iran that we have feared for some time. Before Donald Trump was president, we know that the establishment forces wanted war with Iran. How do we know this? I mean, you go back to the George W. Bush presidency and you can take a look at the real reason for the Iraq and Afghanistan invasions. Yeah. These 2 countries surround Iran. When Donald Trump brought in one of the biggest mistakes he ever did, we brought in John Bolton. Bolton was saying, this time next year, we will be celebrating in Tehran. They want to invade and crush Iran. I think most Americans do not want war. And for what reason are we going to go to war with Iran? Well, now the casus belli is clear for U.S. and Western forces. Iranian-backed Houthi rebels, furious over what's going on with Israel and Palestine, have begun to target civilian trade vessels in the Red Sea. Some cargo transportation companies are suspending trade. I'm going to tell you this. We are very close to Americans en masse demanding war. What we're hearing after the U.S. and the U.K. unilaterally decided to engage in airstrikes in Yemen. Yeah, you're supposed to get approval from Congress here in the United States. But what we're hearing is that, well, Joe Biden has broad powers to go after pirates. Huh? Iranian-backed militia groups in Yemen are pirates, you say. Come on. If it was piracy and there were ships disrupting trade, we'd send in a few warships and shut them down. This is the U.S. striking a nation and targeting a group of individuals backed by one of our chief adversaries that we've been trying to go to war with for a long time. When the cost of goods begins to skyrocket in dramatic ways, this could be bad for Joe Biden because the average person is not going to understand why it's happening, just that it's Joe Biden's fault. But if the Biden administration and the deep state can effectively convey that the reason for increased prices is due to Iran and their backing of Houthi rebels, Americans may demand military action in the Red Sea to stop the attack on trade. Perhaps it won't be Joe Biden. Perhaps it will be warmonger Nikki Hillary. Oh, sorry, Nikki Haley. I can't believe it. Can't believe I did that again. I got to say, I think the play here for Democrats, as we've already seen their strategy unfolding, Nikki Haley is the real Democratic candidate. Her donors are Democrats, her voters are Democrats. And the strategy is not to have a 2024 election in the traditional sense. This is fascinating. The strategy is the GOP primary will be the real election. Donald Trump versus Nikki Haley. Haley, of course, is a Democrat. She says, don't call illegal immigrants criminals. Wow. She takes many leftist progressive stances, but claims to run as a Republican. People who are voting for her in Iowa, for instance, they're Democrats. She won one county by 1 vote, and it is the urban liberal university county. Unsurprising. She is going to, the strategy here is really, really simple. Nikki Haley will win in blue state urban centers. That's their plan. I'm not saying it'll actually happen. But the idea is this. Trump needs to win a primary across the country. Normally, the Democrats run their primary, the Republicans run their primary, and then the general election is split between the swing states. Here's the play. Just have Nikki Haley beat Donald Trump by getting Democrats to vote in the Republican primary. New Hampshire, they're saying now it's going to be 50-50 between the two of them. I know there's other people involved, but it's like split between Trump and Haley. This could be their play. And if it is, my friends, you will get war on a scale hitherto undreamt of. Hitherto. That's the way we'll describe it. Here's the breaking news. Iran fired missiles late on Monday at what it claimed were Israeli spy headquarters near the U.S. consulate in the northern city of Iraq, the northern Iraqi city of Erbil. And it targets linked to extremist groups Islamic State in northern Syria. 4 civilians were killed and 6 injured after missiles hit an upscale area near the U.S. consulate in Erbil, the seat of Iraq's semi-autonomous Kurdish region, according to the Security Council of the Kurdish regional government. Iran's Revolutionary Guard said in a statement that it had hit a headquarters of Mossad, the Israeli intelligence agency in the Kurdish region of Iraq. Another statement said it had fired a number of ballistic missiles at terrorist operations, including Islamic State targets in Syria, and destroyed them. There's videos coming out. It's absolutely crazy. I mean, look at this photo. Video provided by Ru.TV shows smoke rising from a building hit by a strike in Erbil, Iraq, in the early hours Tuesday. We have, it appears we have footage here. They say this is reported from OSINT Defender. Additional footage claimed to show the impact of at least 4 ballistic missiles launched by the Iranian-backed groups toward the U.S. consulate and international airport within the city of Erbil in northern Iraq. Now, this is how it begins. They did not hit the U.S. consulate. My understanding is they didn't hit the airport. It will likely disrupt consulate activities and air traffic activities. And that's it. The casus belli is being laid out before us. Iran is going nuts. The Houthi rebels are shutting down trade. Nikki Haley is going to have her war cry for this election. And the election is happening right now with the primaries. She's going to go to these states and she's going to say, Donald Trump is not going to do... Oh, she does that awful thing where she can't open her mouth. She is going to call for war. She's going to blame Putin. She's going to say because Donald Trump would not stop Vladimir Putin in Ukraine, he's now lending support to Iran. And this axis is expanding its domination in certain regions and disrupting peace around the globe. You vote for her. She will send your sons and daughters to die. The strike comes at a time of heightened tensions in the region and fears of a wider spillover of the ongoing war in Gaza. Since the outbreak of the Israel-Hamas war on October 7th, Iranian-backed militias in Iraq have launched nearly daily drone attacks on bases housing U.S. forces in Iraq and Syria, which the groups have said was in retaliation for Washington's support of Israel and in an attempt to force U.S. troops to leave the region. The United States strongly condemns Iran's reckless missile strikes in Erbil, said State Department spokesperson Matthew Miller. He said the attacks undermined Iraq's stability. A U.S. defense official told AP the U.S. tracked the missiles, which hit in northern Iraq and northern Syria, and no U.S. facilities were struck or damaged in the attacks. The official said that initial indications were that the strikes were reckless and imprecise. An Iraqi security official said Erbil was targeted with several ballistic missiles. An official with an Iranian-backed Iraqi militia said 10 missiles fell in the area near the U.S. consulate. He said the missiles were launched by Iran's Revolutionary Guards. It's getting wild out there. We've got reports that Sweden's preparing for war. We now have reports that Germany is preparing for war. Fox News reports leaked German documents show leaders are preparing should Russia launch World War III. Should Russia? Is that it? Should Russia launch World War III? Well, the U.S., of course, is already condemning the attacks, but the expansion is here. German classified documents show Russia could expand its war on Ukraine by attacking NATO ally countries next year, according to reports. German newspaper Bild published classified documents outlining how Germany plans to prepare for an offensive by Russian President Vladimir Putin. This is what Nikki Haley was saying on the debate stage. Vladimir Putin is not going to stop in Ukraine. He's going to attack our neighbors and expand into Europe. I don't know how she does that. If you watch Nikki Haley speak, her teeth don't move. They never open, but her lips do. You're like, yo, what is up with that? But in all seriousness, this is what they're outlining for us. A Nikki Haley presidency, and then I believe it will be the West escalating the conflict. Now, it's possible Vladimir Putin does decide to invade Poland or something. I don't see why he would. They talk all day and night about how Putin is weakened, his military decimated, despite the fact that he won in Ukraine. Why expand beyond those borders and engage in a conflict with NATO powers? It may not be just Russia, and that's why. It could be China. It could be that Iran starts striking in the Middle East, more than they've already done. They go after Israel, spreading U.S. forces. Venezuela makes a move for Guyana. China makes a move for Taiwan. And then Vladimir Putin makes an offensive move into expanding control of Ukraine and eventually pressing on NATO borders. Should something like that happen, perhaps then Vladimir Putin actually would make a move on Poland. But I don't think it's just, look, war doesn't happen in a vacuum. The U.S. engages in activities that pisses off other countries. Those countries engage in activities that piss us off, and ain't nobody going to back down. The outlet based its claims on information obtained from the German Ministry of Defense and said armed forces in Europe are preparing for an attack by Russia on Eastern Europe, which could include a cyber offensive. The Alliance Defense 2024 is one of the scenarios being watched that could start in February, include the mobilization of about 200,000 Russian soldiers, according to the report. With troops in place and funding from the West diminishing, Putin would reportedly have the troops attack Ukrainian forces in a spring offensive. Bill described a scenario that shows Russia, by July, could begin launching severe cyber attacks in the Baltics, drawing dissatisfaction from Russians living in Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. Then in September, clashes could escalate, according to the classified documents, and be used by Putin as a reason to launch the next phase called Zapad 2024, which is described as a large-scale military exercise involving about 50,000 Russian troops in Western Russia and Belarus. According to the documents, Russia could then mobilize troops and mid-range missiles to Kaliningrad, which is a Russian territory located between the NATO countries of Poland and Lithuania. I think it's very important to bring this up because we have talked about Kaliningrad before, but I think to help you understand, we should pull up, I'll pull up the Google Maps here so you can see what this really means. Kaliningrad is a serious, something we should consider very, very seriously. It is a Russian oblast surrounded by Lithuania and Poland, bordered, blocked by these two countries. It's on the Baltic, which gives Russia access to warfare, naval warfare in these regions. Now, with the spike of conflict in Ukraine, there were fears that Russia would try to secure a land bridge not just to Crimea, but also to Kaliningrad. Moving forces through Belarus, they would have to make a move on Poland and take this area near what looks like, I pronounce it Suwałki, however you pronounce it, Suwałki, because this is the straight path they could probably get through if they're trying to go into Belarus so that Russia can transport goods by ground and military forces. I don't know. I really have no idea. Perhaps. They say Bill has also reported that by December, Russia could use the U.S. presidential election as an opportunity to disperse more propaganda of border conflict or riots with numerous deaths to fuel violence in the Suwałki Gap, bringing on unrest. Exactly what I was just saying. The following month, in January 2025, Russia would then accuse Western allies of planning moves against Putin's regime after the UN Security Council meeting, which the Russian leader could use to rally troops in the Baltics and Belarus by March 2025. Yo, pay attention. It is life or death. I don't know look, I think Donald Trump is the right play. I think you vote for Trump, we avoid World War III. But I don't know for sure. I feel like any president faced with a scenario like this is going to be backed into a corner. And it's not a question of what you want them to do. It's a question of the only thing that can be done. I don't have the answers for you. Many would argue that no matter what happens in Europe, the U.S. should not get involved. And I totally respect and understand that. If Europe and Russia want to fight, or I should say if Western Europe and Eastern Europe get into these fights, and they want to leave themselves smoldering nuclear wastelands, I see no reason why the Western Hemisphere should ignite itself as well. The argument that the U.S. getting involved could prevent nuclear apocalypse could be said, you could say the inverse. The U.S. getting involved would only exacerbate the potential for overt nuclear conflict. I have no good answers for you. The only advice I can give is start preparing now. I hope we do not see this conflict. But I don't believe the real catalyst is just Russia. I think China, Taiwan. This is our global front. The Middle East, Eastern Europe, China, and of course, South America. They are all on the verge of escalating conflict. Now, to be fair, the Venezuela-Guyana conflict isn't as alarming to me, but it would be a war. It would be indicative of world war. China-Taiwan is serious. But at the same time, again, while Taiwan has great defenses, we're not talking about... Taiwan's relatively small, and this is regional. So it would be world war. But we're talking about Russia. If this is true, staging an attack on NATO nuclear-powered allies. That is grand-scale conflict. And with all these other conflicts spread around the region, China-Taiwan doesn't just become China-Taiwan. China allies with Russia, provides them armaments. The U.S. then goes to war in the Pacific theater, bringing in Australia, Japan, South Korea. Alaska's looking pretty nice. Maybe we should set up a base of operations up there. Or at the very least, maybe El Salvador. The document said NATO would take measures of credible deterrence by May 2025 in response to the buildup of Russian troops and to prevent combat between Russian and Western troops. Bild explained the documents outlined a potential scenario which was put together by German and Army generals and European allies, taking Russia's threat seriously. Still, Russia and Putin have denied they would escalate the conflict with Ukraine beyond the country's borders. And I believe that makes the most sense. I don't see a legitimate reason why he would do this. However, with the escalation of conflict with Iran, I don't think it's a choice. I think Vladimir Putin just says, the war is expanding. We will defend our allies. And it becomes something much more substantial and much more serious. Worse still, my fear would be that Joe Biden provokes conflict, pushes us into serious war, and he does it because he doesn't want to see Donald Trump win the presidency. What would a Trump presidency look like? When Trump was president, 2016 to 2020, no new wars. No conflict in Ukraine. I went to Ukraine in 2013, at the end of the year, and I saw the escalation of protests. I was there at the beginning of 2014. I went back again a couple years later. I was talking with people, and the fascinating thing was, when I first went to Ukraine and saw the conflict, they were saying it was a protest, but it quickly started to devolve into some kind of civil war with the ousting of President Yanukovych. When I returned several years later, I returned in 2017. I was told by my friend, no, they don't call it civil war anymore. It's over. Really? Yeah, there are some people fighting in the east. This is what I was told by Ukrainians on the ground. But the scale of conflict has diminished rapidly. And then Joe Biden took the White House. And now all of a sudden, it's full-scale war, civil war, conflict, and Russia is winning. Joe Biden doesn't want to lose. The deep state doesn't want to lose. Nikki Haley doesn't want to lose. Nikki Haley, of course, being good friends with all of them. So what will happen? Perhaps war erupts. And there are a lot of really strange and dark scenarios that could happen. With Vivek Ramaswamy dropping out of the Republican primary, I am quite worried. Here's a scenario for all of you, the worst case, that I hope doesn't happen. I'll start light, actually. Let's start with some light scenarios. Donald Trump loses. He loses the primary because urban Democrats vote for Nikki Haley, and she actually wins places like New Hampshire and then secures the nomination. Trump cries foul, runs an independent, RFK, Trump, Nikki Haley, Joe Biden. Nikki Haley or Biden wins. We get war. Here's another scenario. Joe Biden's not going to be able to run. The dude's completely out of it. He'll lose. What happens if the front runner, Donald Trump, right before the election, loses his life not to an assassination, but to a terror attack? We must, and I will stress this right now, do everything we can, and I mean this figuratively as a culture and community and country. I call on the Secret Service to protect the lives wholeheartedly and with the best of their honor and faith of all of our presidential candidates. And I think they should do this now. That means Kamala Harris and Joe Biden you got to redouble up your protection of these individuals. I think we must make sure there is protection for Ron DeSantis, Nikki Haley, and Donald Trump. I don't care. All of them. There's fear that the deep state will stop at nothing to defeat Donald Trump. Nothing. And there's been conversations about fears of an assassination attempt on him. But we know what happens when someone tries to assassinate a president to become more popular. But what do you think would happen if the attack came from an enemy of this nation? Or what if it was a false flag? And they say Russia planted a bomb, or Russia sabotaged through cyber attacks this facility. And for that, Donald Trump lost his life. Sure, he'd be more popular than ever. And they would then call for war and retaliation. And I tell you this, I strongly believe Trump supporters in a scenario like that would demand the war themselves. They would say, they took Trump from us. They must pay. Many of them would say we don't want war. That's fair because Trump doesn't want war, and that's why they like him. That's why I like him. But others would say, if we were not to retaliate after the life of our president was taken, we're not a nation. And many have argued that, and I agree. If an enemy nation takes the life of your president and you do not retaliate, are you even a country? I mean, that's one of the most, that is probably the most egregious attack on a nation. Oh, I know the U.S. engages in these tactics. Yeah, we're not excusing the U.S. But this is a scenario I fear that could actually result in a majority of people in this country passively or even actively supporting World War III. Start preparing, my man. I think chickens are a good place to start if you can legally have them. You know, backyard chickens. Chickens are based AF. They make eggs. You get some roosters. Roosters scream all day. It's good fun. I hope you're paying attention to what's going on in the world because things are getting hot. I'll leave it there. Next segment is coming up at 4 p.m. on this channel. Thanks for hanging out, and I'll see you all then.